Many of you have had a long day here in California. We're just getting started, but super excited to be here. We're going to be sharing with you, Priyanka and I are going to be sharing with you some of the findings from our recently published study on people analytics. And for those of you who I had the chance to meet last year when we were all in person, pre this pandemic, you heard us talking a lot about the research and how we were looking for folks to help us get started. And we were really kind of in the beginning phases of the work. And so we're really excited today to bring this new research to you and to share what we've learned across the last year. So before we get too far down, it would be remiss to not stop and thank those who helped us make this research possible, and that is PAFOW itself, as well as Insight 222. They both sponsored the research, which gave us the funding and ability to do the work, and we ultimately published this research that you'll see today under two studies. So the first, on the left, a study of the market itself, so what's changing in the market. And we're actually today not going to touch on hardly anything that we put into that study, maybe a little bit, but not a lot. So if you're really interested in kind of what's been happening with the market, go there. And then the other study is focused just specifically on the vendors. And so we'll touch quite a bit on what we learned in that study and then augment it today with some of the what we've learned in the last week or so about what vendors are doing with regard to helping their customers respond to COVID. So again, thank you, PAFOW and Insight 222. So let me tell you just a little bit about our research journey today. I touched on it a moment ago, but as I said, it started a little bit over a year ago when we first launched the research back at PAFOW in San Francisco in 2019. So a little bit over a year ago, like I said. And we've been on this iterative process and journey of working with the vendors to understand what it is that they do, interviewing customers, and then sharing results and getting feedback, and incorporating that and then continuing to do our work. And so right now we have the culmination of that is what we're going to share today. So let's get kind of started jumping in here. Obviously, what's happening with COVID-19 has really fundamentally shifted how people are doing work. And we're hearing that this focus on employee engagement and productivity is pretty much the top issue that organizations are looking at when it comes to concerns with regard to employees. This data is specifically from APAC. It's from our friends over at Gartner, and it was for the March period, so it's about a month old now. But we all know that APAC was farther along in kind of this pandemic experience than the rest of us. So I think it's fair to say that this holds true, and it also holds true with the many roundtables that we've been holding and speaking with customers and leaders at different organizations. So we know employee engagement and productivity is tops. But when it comes to what people analytics is being able to do right now to manage the COVID-19 crisis, we find that unfortunately it's not necessarily as high impact as we might hope for. So the primary areas that folks have been able to focus on are reporting. In the way that this group, the HR Analytics think tank, looked at it, they defined that as just providing lists of employee data to decision makers. And then descriptive data, so just kind of a description of how COVID-19 is impacting the business. But there's been less of a focus on diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive. And obviously, we all know here in this audience that those are where we start to actually be able to drive a bit more impact in a business. Now, when we look at the technology that people analytics teams have today, we find that the tools aren't necessarily always meeting the need, and that may be why we saw some of what was happening before. And so on the last slide about not necessarily being able to drive as much impact as we were hoping for. So this question was from this HR Analytics think tank group again, and they found that only about 20% of respondents, and these were people analytics leaders, who said that their technology was actually really helping them dial in to address the challenges and the questions that are happening right now during COVID-19. So clearly there's a need for the technology, as we can see from the interest and the focus on employee engagement and productivity, but there seems to be a bit of a disconnect in terms of the technology that people have today. And of course, we all know that we're not necessarily going to be able to hire our way out of this. When we looked, this is again data from just last month, and this is from the good folks over at MC. When they looked at the workforce analyst job title, we see that there's actually a decrease of about 9% in terms of the number of job postings for that. That was in March. We know that here in April that has probably gone down more. So we're not necessarily, organizations are not looking to hire people to address this challenge right now, given everything that's happening. And even if they were, this is some data that we collected earlier this month. We knew that in the last year, we were only, on average, most organizations hiring about 1 to 4 people. So we couldn't still even hire our way to fix this challenge of trying to get better information and data. So that leads us to say, look, technology is still the answer. We kind of put this slide in here tongue in cheek that technology where anything is possible, but technology is still the answer for many organizations to help them get the insights they need to certainly right now address the COVID-19 challenges, but also more broadly to help better align to the business and to drive business impact. And so this is really where our study is designed to come in and to help all of you, is to say, okay, even in this crazy time, we still need this tech, and we need it to be dialed into what we need to do. So how should we be thinking about it? When we did this research, at the very beginning, we were very excited about all the different features and functionalities. And when Priyanka and I were talking about it, we came back and said, this is kind of like when we were younger and we first saw Super Mario Brothers. And you go in there and it was so cool. I don't know about if you all remember, but you would go in and there were the different things you could jump over. There were the turtles, there were the magic stars. There's all this really cool stuff that you could do. But ultimately, that kind of faded into the background pretty quickly. And you said, really, the big question is, how do I win? And that's the same question that we're asking about the people analytics technology. How do I use it to win? How do I use it to drive impact? And so historically, when I was a kid, I might go over to a friend's house and ask them, hey, how did you learn how to beat this level, or how did you do this? And the equivalent of that today is kind of some of our networking conversations that we have, which is, hey, how did you use such and such technology to solve this problem? And those are really great ways to get information. But they're, in today's day and age, is kind of a new approach. And that is to learn from others who have done it and to do that at scale. Now, in the last 6 weeks, this photo has started to give me heebie-jeebies because none of these people are social distancing, which is of course problematic. But all of us are on YouTube learning from each other, and that's kind of what we're trying to do with this research, is to help you learn from kind of the collective wisdom of what we've collected together, to learn how to make people analytics technology more effective for your organization, and also just to understand what it is that's out there. Whether you're trying to fix a problem right now in the middle of this pandemic, or you're trying to build a more long-term solution. So to do that, to kind of leverage the superpowers of people analytics technology, you need to do a few things. So the first is to understand your landscape, and that's what I'm going to talk about here for a few minutes. The second is what we call leveling up. So these are to find your boosters, the things that make you stronger and improve your capabilities. And then the third is to avoid pitfalls, so avoid the challenges that you might come across. So let's start with that first one around understanding your landscape. So when we looked at this space, we identified a total of 10 vendor categories. And these categories are kind of, if you think about them on the left-hand side of the slide, these are really some of the silos, if you will, of the vendors in terms of what they are, or talent silos, excuse me, in terms of what they focus on. So and silos is probably the wrong word this morning. It's probably more the verticals is the word I'm looking for. But so we've got things like D&I pay equity analysis, employee coaching, engagement and experience, which is obviously critical here, HCM analysis, etc. On the right-hand side, we have what we call more the horizontal, and that is things like multi-source analysis, so bringing in data from a bunch of different sources and analyzing it to understand an overall problem, text analysis, and O&A. Now, we know that this is useful because this can help us understand, okay, if I am going after a specific type of problem, these are the types of vendors, which is great. But what it doesn't help us do is understand, how are these tools used? How frequently are they used? Where are they getting data from? How does it combine? And so that's what we tried to do with our research, was to kind of move beyond just these verticals and just some of the simplistic other definitions that others have used, things like, what we had before, reporting, descriptive, prescriptive, etc. Because a lot of these tools can do all those things. So we tried to roll this up instead into a more broad solution matrix that would help us understand how people are using the tools. So let me go ahead and understand that, or explain that. So over here, we start on our x-axis. And on the x-axis, we look at what are the analysis, how frequently are the solutions being used to do the analysis. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean how frequently can data be imported into the solutions, because we all know that that can be done, up to a second-by-second basis for many of these solutions if you want. But it's really, how often are they being used? Are they being used for frequent analysis? And so we define that as, up to a quarter or even monthly at the center, all the way to continuous analysis, meaning that we're looking at it on a weekly or day-by-day basis. We then look at the y-axis and we categorize the vendors by data creator on the bottom and then data aggregator on the top. So data creator is those who are creating the data, collecting it, pulling it together into one place. On the top, we've got data aggregator, meaning that they're pulling in data from a number of different sources, and they're bringing together to create kind of a broader understanding of a situation or a question. So if we then overlay on that to kind of understand this a little bit more and start up here on the upper left, we have what we call accumulated analytics. And the types of solutions here are, as you can see, things like workforce planning and text analysis, D&I, labor market analysis, O&A, and learning analysis. Continuing on down to the lower left, we have what we're calling snapshot analysis. And so this tends to be O&A. On this whole side, again, these are ones who, you might be using this data on a quarterly or monthly basis. So you're using it really to kind of understand a situation and to make some more strategic decisions. On the right-hand side, as you'll see, a lot of this data will be more for making operational decisions. That's not to say that you could analyze the data longitudinally and get more strategic insight, but they just also tend to be used on a much more frequent basis. So continuing on that vein, on the lower right, we have what we call targeted analytics, and those are, that's primarily employee engagement and experience vendors. And then in the upper right, we have what we call guiding analytics. And these are the multi-source analysis platforms, so those that pull in data from many different places. Learning analysis, HCM and integrated talent management analysis, O&A, employee engagement experience, and coaching. So these are, again, those where you're accessing the data on a more regular basis, using it to make more operational decisions potentially. But then you can also look at it for longitudinally for the more strategic. Now, you might notice that we have, let's say, for example, organizational network analysis in 3 different places, and say, well, why is that? And the reason for that is that there are different types of solutions who do things in different ways. So the O&A vendors who are in snapshot analytics have a different approach than those who are up there in the upper right under the guiding analytics. And so this gets back to the point of where I started, which is you can't just have the vertical categories. You have to understand kind of how they're used to understand some of the differences in the vendors. So next question we often get is, well, who's in these different groups? Where do folks fit? And this is where we put folks, based on a lot of conversations, many conversations of where folks should be. And so you can see, again, we've got a few duplicates here on this slide, where we have, for instance, Visier up there on the right under guiding analytics, because they're what we call that multi-source analysis platform, but then they also do workforce planning. So if somebody has a distinctly different solution in 2 different areas, we've gone ahead and put them on this. Now, one thing I'll note here, while folks are reading this and taking it in, is that the this information was information that we collected across the course of last year. We are going to be going back out to the vendors in May, so just next month, to get updated data and to update this chart and all the information we have in this study. So we will have a lot more to say come the fall, and that'll also allow us to provide some, again, longitudinal data on what we're seeing with regard to the vendors. One thing I want to mention for you is we have a tool that we have put online, and it is a free tool that you can use to understand what's happening or who's in these different categories and within the market more broadly. So it's pretty interesting in that you can come in and click on the tool, and you'll have this view as you see it. And you can see up there on the upper right, it says view by, and it says companies. And so you would be able to then go in and you could click on a given company. Let's say we clicked here on Polynode. It would underscore, it's a snapshot analytics, and they're an organizational network analysis. And then it would pull up for you all of the information that we put in the report. So they're a summary at the top over on the upper left, a summary of the capabilities that they have, and then our comments as an analyst firm on the vendor, specifically an overview and what we particularly liked about their offering. We have provided this because we wanted to be able to kind of pull out in a simple way some of the key insights from the report and to really make this data and information usable to folks. So you don't necessarily have to go thumbing through the report, but instead you can actually use this tool, which is built on Tableau, to access the information. You can also, let's say you're just starting to look for a new solution, you can also go and look at this by categories. And so you'll be able to click on a given category and see who's within that specific market. So again, if you clicked on something like multi-source analysis platforms, you'll be able to see everyone who's in that space. Then you could click on each of those names and get information on each of the individual vendors. So that's kind of the summary of the landscape and what we learned. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Priyanka now, and she's going to talk to you a bit about what we have learned specifically as it relates to COVID-19 and the vendors in terms of what they're offering, what folks are interested in and what they're offering that can help folks as they work through this time right now. Priyanka?
Thank you, Stacia. Yeah, so going back a little bit, in March, about a month ago, we held a roundtable with folks to discuss what are some of the issues that are on top of the mind for organization when it comes to employees and what they're thinking about most. And not surprisingly, as you can see from the screen, some of the most talked about issues were employee experience, engagement, teams, communications, and different work environments. And given all that we'd been seeing and hearing, we then decided that we wanted to hear from vendors on what they are doing to help with those issues. And so this month, we reached back to the vendors to find out how they are helping the customers and the broader community. And as we move to the next slide, here we have highlighted some of the categories that are most actively responding when it comes to providing resources to the people analytics communities. And we will very briefly share with you some of the resources offered by the vendors here. So starting with the first category here, we have employee coaching, and the vendor that we've highlighted here is Cultivate. Cultivate has launched a guide for remote working along with a self-awareness quiz and a work from home quiz. And while the guide is focused on specifically helping the managers, the quizzes are aimed at individuals and give insights into behaviors such as after work emails, one-on-ones, feedback frequency, and empathy, among other. So moving to the next category, which is our most popular category here, it seems currently is engagement and experience. And again, one of the major priorities for organizations during this crisis has been to keep their remote workforce truly engaged and ensuring a positive experience. And so we saw a number of vendors that we reached out to are offering resources and tools to help companies keep their workforce engaged. And in fact, we've heard from some of them already today. And just want to highlight a few over here, such as Qualtrics and Medallia and Perceptics that are offering pulse surveys for employees to manage remote work. Medallia's pulse survey leverages both text and video feedback. They're also offering a collaboration platform called Crowd City that helps companies to crowdsource ideas from employees during this time. Another vendor that we want to highlight is Worklytics, who's been working with customers to leverage anonymous data from productivity tools such as Slack, Office 365, and G Suite, etc., which is able to give insights into the levels of employee engagement, productivity, and collaboration at the macro levels. And finally, another vendor that we wanted to highlight here is Humu, that has started giving free remote work nudges to anybody who wants to sign up for them. These are short suggestions to help people work remotely from home and navigate uncertainty. And it seems to be really popular because the vendor shared with us that on the first day that they launched it, about 5,000 people signed up for it. So moving on to the next category here, we have multi-source analysis platforms. And these are vendors that are primarily focused on helping their customers integrate and manage the new data that they're collecting to track the crisis. So for example, one model is focused on helping organizations that don't have their data house in order to track COVID impacts. They've also been working with customers to integrate new data sets that contain COVID tracking data, employee survey results, and work from home data that organizations are continuously collecting, and share those in a quick manner with the leaders for better insights. And the vendor has also developed a very simple basic Excel tool, which is free for all and will allow organizations that don't have people analytic functions to track, collect, and measure data on their workforce. Another vendor that we quickly wanted to highlight is Visio, and we just heard from them recently. They've been hosting weekly forums featuring people analytics practitioners, leaders, and vendors to share stories and ideas and advice on how to best leverage people analytics during this crisis. They have launched their new crisis analysis capabilities that are being leveraged by their customers for workforce planning and to understand longer-term impact of the crisis. Their tool also includes what-if modeling. And speaking of what-if modeling, another vendor that is seeing a spike in customers using those capabilities and their scenario planning tools is Vimo Workforce. So that is another vendor that we just wanted to highlight here. Moving to our next category, we have...
Priyanka, I did want to mention over on the left-hand side, in case folks didn't hear, Visior is also doing the data integration from news sources with COVID-19 data. So they did an impressive job of not just using the Johns Hopkins data that a lot of folks are doing, but actually going back to the sources of that data and coming up with their own data model that is a little bit more cleaner and attractive to what is needed for their solution. So I thought that was particularly remarkable.
Yes, I agree. Thank you so much. Great. So moving to our next category, organizational network analysis. And here we have vendors who've been helping organizations really grapple with issues of connectivity, isolation, and overall organizational health. So Humanize, for example, has published a number of white papers and publications on their website that focus on understanding the broader organizational health and maintaining productivity. Innovisor has launched a pulse tracker, which is aimed at managers keeping their teams connected and productive. They have run the product in 16 countries so far and is free to their existing customers as of now. Finally, Polynode over here in this category has been working with customers to leverage ONA analysis capabilities to ensure the well-being of their staff and preventing isolation and addressing communication challenges, especially when it comes to connecting with outside of the immediate teams. So over to the next category, we have learning analytics, and the vendor that we have under this category is mLevel, which has partnered with online learning platform called disasterready.org. And what they're doing is providing free learning and development resources that are specifically focused on the well-being during this crisis period. They've also partnered with Microsoft Teams to offer modules on how it can be used as an educational tool during this time. Then our next category is workforce planning, and we already mentioned MC and how helpful they're being in providing labor market data during this time. In addition to that, they've also launched a resume optimizer, which is geared to help people who are looking for jobs highlight the skills that are needed for specific roles. They've also made 2 dashboards live that focus on job postings in US and Canada. And then finally, our last category is text analysis. And the vendor that we have under this category is Organization View, who is building new text classification models to help customers really get deeper insights on their employees more efficiently and the challenges that they're facing in this time. They're also hosting virtual presentations and trainings for practitioners to explain advanced text analytics capabilities such as word embeddings. So that was a brief summary of some of the vendors that we heard from. There's a lot more detail that we'll be sharing in the coming days through blogs and some articles. But while we were going through these resources that the vendors shared with us, and we knew about them, we asked ourselves, what else can vendors do to help during this crisis? And one of our findings from our vendor landscape study when we published our report last year was that in order to offer greater value, vendors need to go beyond offering capabilities that are necessary, but not necessarily differentiating. So we group them under 3 categories, and we think these capabilities are what provide greatest value, and we think these are still pretty relevant during this crisis time. So as you can see, the 3 categories that we have here are addressing barriers, enabling insight, and making it human. So very quickly, we'll just touch upon them in a little bit of detail. So moving to the first differentiator, which is addressing barriers, we have 2 elements in this. By this, we mean that solutions that allow you to overcome your biggest challenges, which is integrating different and disparate data sources simply and providing leadership on privacy and ethics. So we know that integrating different and disparate data sources is a challenge, and a number of vendors claim to be able to do this. But we think there's room to be able to do this in a much more efficient way, doing it in a pain-free way, and doing it without losing any data and context in the process. And speaking of privacy and ethics, when we conducted a survey last year, only 6% of vendors said that they take a lead on this, and they listed this as a differentiator. So we think there's a real opportunity here for vendors to distinguish themselves and differentiate themselves by taking a lead on these issues. And we'll come back to this issue of privacy and ethics because we think this is still really, really relevant in today's time. So moving to our next differentiator, which is enabling new insight, and there are 3 elements that are part of this. So the first is passive data collection. And what we mean by this is that when we spoke to vendors, a lot of them are collecting data directly from the employees or passively from other HR systems. What they're not doing is collecting passive data based on digital exhaust, which can reveal a lot about what employees are actually doing, and that can be a real value add. The second element that we have here is sophisticated language analysis. Now, some of the vendors are starting to do this, but we think there's a scope here to do this on a much more sophisticated level and on a wider scale to understand the perceptions and attitudes of employees. And finally, we have sharing insights with employees and managers. So we know that when there's transparency on data collection and insights, employees are more likely to be open to have data collected on them. It can help improve their performance as well as well-being. And also we think it is the right thing to do. So there's a real scope here for leaders to be able to be doing this on a much wider scale. Then finally, our third differentiator is making it human. And there are 2 elements to this differentiator. The first is community and collective intelligence, creating communities of people who can help each other better understand their data and run analysis makes this entire process human. When we conducted our survey, only 3% of vendors claimed to be doing this. However, over the past few months, we have seen several vendors leverage and offer resources such as forums and groups and communities where people are able to share knowledge and experiences. So this has definitely been a step in the right direction during this time. The second element is storytelling. Stories, as we know, provide context and allow us to connect. They are what turns insights into actions, which is so very much needed right now. Unfortunately, only 1% of vendors on our survey indicated this as a differentiator for them. And we think storytelling can be a real value add here during this time. So Coming to our final part of this presentation, again, one of the findings that we covered in our study was that in order for practitioners to reach their goal and achieve success, they need to avoid certain pitfalls. And the most important one that we identified is the issue of data ethics and privacy. And we think this continues to be of great importance during this COVID-19 crisis as well. So the reason for this being the most important issue is because we know that data says it is. Overlooking issues of ethics and privacy can result in a failed people analytics initiatives. 81% of HR and people analytics leaders have said that their people analytics projects are jeopardized by such concerns. And secondly, in our opinion, the bigger risk is the loss of human trust. So according to Edelman's 2020 research, ethics are 3 times more likely to drive trust among employees. So the dangers of over-monitoring and excessive data gathering, especially in times like these today, they are very real and can result in a break of employee trust if not done in a thoughtful manner. So what should you be doing? Where do the vendors stand, and what is it that they're leaving up to you to do? So again, going back to our survey results, 55% of vendors think that their role is limited when it comes to data ethics and privacy, implying that others, meaning you practitioners, are primarily responsible for taking the lead and establishing the norms for this. And additionally, 50% or fewer vendors allow employees to access insights on themselves, correct data, or understand how their data is analyzed. So as practitioners, you need to be leading the charge on these issues and making sure you avoid these pitfalls. And this has never been more important as it is today, again, in this crisis. So those were some of our findings from a study that we think are still quite relevant today. And I'll hand it over to Stacia to wrap up.
Great.
Stacia?
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Thank you. So given all that, we had in the study put a looking forward part of it. And so we think that this is still an important thing to include today. So what do we see is going to happen? First is a shift towards technology and people analytics technology in particular being used for more development. Now, in the current situation, we know that as people have moved into remote work, this question of how do people learn, how do they get access to resources to do their work and to learn these new systems and approaches they're having to use in this environment has been a big issue. So this idea of using the technology to understand how people are developing and the return on the efforts that are put into development, we think is it's certainly important now, and it's going to continue to be important in the future. The second big shift we think is going to happen is around this concept of employee ownership of data. Now, I remember last year at PAFOW London, sitting on the stage with other panelists, and we were discussing this topic, and I think it's become an even bigger one in that we think that the employees being able to own their data, own their relationships, and that being information that they can take with them when they move on to their next employer is likely to gain more traction. We're starting to see some organizations come together to support this concept using blockchain and enabling that within the different technologies. So that's something to kind of keep your eye on as coming down the pike. The third one, which Priyanka mentioned, is more passive data. You know, given the conversations that we've actually had since this report came out initially, I know many of you are on this and thinking heavily about how do we integrate more passive data, but doing that in a way that respects data ethics and privacy. And so we know that this is critical, particularly for those of you who are in Europe and having to work with works councils, but in general, it's critical for all the reasons that Priyanka mentioned. So we think that's still going to be an issue moving forward. But then, this was what we had kind of said in the report, but then Priyanka and I spent some time thinking about, well, given what's happening with COVID, what's going to potentially happen post this time? And here are a few things that we came up with. So first, focus on trust and transparency. So we've seen a number of vendors take the lead on offering resources that facilitate greater information and resource sharing and clearer and more frequent communications between leaders. And we know that that has been really important. So in some of the roundtables that Priyanka mentioned that we've been running, this concept of how do we create greater insight around what people should be doing, help people trust the organization, trust what's happening, understand what may be coming down the road has been really, really important. And that is a role that people analytics and the technologies that support those teams have an opportunity to continue to do after this. So this is kind of been one of our moments to shine, if you will, and we think that that's going to continue. The second big theme we've seen in those roundtables has been this focus on well-being and psychological safety. So to what extent can we be using these technologies to understand what's happening on this front with well-being and psychological safety? And we expect that to be an even bigger component of things moving forward. The third has been this concept of deconstructing work and looking beyond titles. So we all know that, or many of us know that within the context of this whole discussion of understanding work, there's been this parallel discussion of understanding the skills that everyone has. And the idea being that we should be focusing on the skills that we need for different projects and not necessarily focused on the jobs themselves. Now, when we're in a remote work environment where we've kind of already broken down a lot of barriers, and I think that what we're seeing from our conversations is that is continuing to happen. And we think that that's likely going to accelerate as we move beyond COVID, as people are trying to figure out, okay, what is the maximally efficient way to do this work? So that's another thing to keep your eye on. And then the final one has been the importance of knowing who your essential workers are. So we've heard from so many different organizations that they didn't have an essential worker designation in their systems, and quite frankly, really, why would you, unless you had done some significant planning for an event such as this? But we think that moving forward, we're going to hear a lot more about understanding who our essential workers are and in what context, and who, and if we have a similar sort of situation, or if we have something else that will need us to understand our workers better, anticipating that a bit more. So those are the things that we're kind of seeing post this event. So I think we're about 10 minutes early, and I don't know, Al, if you're going to have time or if you're going to facilitate questions. But in the meantime, I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all the vendors who've participated in the research so far, all the customers, people analytics practitioners who have participated in our research. We could not do this work without you and giving your time, and particularly those of you who have given time during the middle of this pandemic. We know it's not easy, but we can't report this data. We can't help get the word out unless you talk to us and help us. So thank you to those of you who have. On the slide here, you see links to the research, and then also a link to that free public tool that highlights what's happening with all the different vendors. And if you want to participate in this coming year's research, just go ahead and reach out. All of our information's on there. Go ahead and connect with us on LinkedIn. And like I said, we're going to be kicking off the next part of the study here in mid-May. So we will look forward to reaching out to you and speaking with you then. Okay, I think that's all that we have right now. Here's just a little bit on RedThread if you want to get in touch. Thanks so much.
Stacia, Priyanka, thank you very much. Fantastic, real landmark research, and every time I see it, it's evolved even more. I've got a question actually, because I think I love the tips that you had for the vendor community to actually where to focus. And I think the ethics privacy thing, I agree, it's something that we hear a lot of the time with the customers that we're talking to or clients we're talking to at LinkedIn, at Inside 222, which of course are the customers effectively of these tech providers. It's interesting that your data point that only 6% take the lead, and then you've got that other one around only 50% provide access of the insights to effectively to the people that are providing the data. One other data point is that Accenture, I think, found in a study they published at Davos last year that 92% of employees are actually quite happy to provide their data as long as they get personal benefit from it. So, and I think this crisis probably talks even more to that. Do you have examples of any of the vendors who actually are doing some really great work in this area at all that you're able to share, even if you have to anonymize the vendor?
In terms of taking a lead on kind of the ethics discussion?
helping their customers to really, help embed this within their organizations, because we know there's, particularly in Europe, there are challenges around works councils and things like that. Are vendors actually helping their customers to actually navigate those steps?
Yeah, what's interesting is since we collected this data, we have heard. I'm going to focus on O&A because that's been one of the particularly sticky wickets within Europe in terms of getting around the works councils. And I've heard from several different O&A vendors that they have basically cracked the nut a bit in terms of how to work with the works councils and to be clear about, okay, this is kind of the playbook for how we're going to provide, this is what we're going to share with the works councils. And within that, this is what information employees will be able to see. This is what, various managers will be able to see. So kind of those different levels of security of information and access to information. And the vendors themselves are taking the lead on kind of designing that playbook because and I know, David, you probably have a perspective here, but it seemed like for a long time, O&A in Europe was just like, we can't do that. And I feel like I'm starting to see in the last 6 months or maybe 8 months, a shift to like, okay, we can do that. And the vendors have a clear sense of how to do that. So I think that's one example of how they're taking the lead.
Yeah, and it's interesting, actually. We've got a presentation, I can't remember if it's tomorrow or Thursday, from Jakob Jeppesen of Novo Nordisk, which obviously is a European headquartered organization, and it's about O&A. I don't know what's in it, but it'll be interesting to see, where they're one of the organizations that are actually using some of the network analysis. But yeah, I agree, and certainly speaking to some of the vendors myself, I know that the market for them has been smaller in Europe, than it has been in North America and even in Asia Pacific and other parts of the world. So we do have one question on the side. I do know the answer to this, but I'm going to let you answer it, Stacia or Priyanka. Do you have pricing information included in the study at all?
So we do not, and as you know, David, because we've had this, and Al, we've had this discussion numerous times. The reason we do not is because one, the pricing is pretty varied, and we didn't feel like we got enough data to be confident in what we would report out. And if there is anything we do not want to do, that is muddy the waters. Our whole intention is to make things clearer and more understandable. So we do have a customer survey that people can access. It's at peopleanalyticstech.com. I think we usually have it in here, but I think we pulled it out of this deck. But peopleanalyticstech.com. And in that, you all can provide your pricing information. And so once we get enough information that we feel reasonably confident, we will report it. But we do not have it with enough confidence at the moment.
Yeah, and I think it's a particularly sensitive area because it's quite hard to compare apples with apples sometimes. And, and a lot of the pricing will depend on the organization, the number of licenses, so many different variables. I guess, as you said, it could muddy the waters a little bit. And present something that's a bit unfair. Al, I'm going to turn it over to you to see if you have any questions as well for Priyanka and Stacia.
Yeah, I think Stacia just started to answer it, but I'll toss this over to Priyanka. What's next, given the study? I know this is a multi-year effort, and you're trying to get deeper and more valuable insights. So each step, what do you have planned?
Yeah, so one of our main goals for 2020 is to update the tool that Stacia had shared. And what we'll be doing for this year is reaching back to the vendors that we spoke to last year, and also some new vendors who've reached out to us since we published the report, and really trying to understand what are the updates and changes that they've made since then, updating the tool, trying to get a few more customer stories from them, maybe create some more rankings than we have currently, and just share that information more broadly for this year at least. Yeah. Stacia, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I think even more immediately, Priyanka gave a high-level blush of what we were seeing from the vendors with regard to COVID. We're going to write that up The vendors were very generous. We reached out to everybody who was in this report and said, what are you doing? And they just provided us with amazing information. And so we could only get a little bit of it in here. So we're going to try to do a longer, more extended blog. And so the idea is that for practitioners, you may be working on something and say, hey, I didn't know that so-and-so was offering this. This would be really useful to me. So just trying to give another way to get great information out there on how we can help people during this challenging time.
Yeah, I think to add that, I mean, despite what I've seen elsewhere, I think the vendor response to this has been fantastic, from Vizia and others standing up, crisis management forums, for practitioners to share stories of each other. It really is, the collaboration that's in the community has been shared by the vendor community as well, I think.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback that having been in role before, it was the case where we used the tools at our disposal at that time to analyze internal data primarily. And now there's all these data, all these technologies in the marketplace that can effectively automate or make the data collection and analytics and distribution process better, more accurate, faster, wider. And so it's incumbent upon us in the profession to understand what's happening, and for you to curate that on behalf of the community is of massive value. So thank you, both Stacia and Priyanka, for the work that you've done. It's really great stuff. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. It's been a real opportunity to be a part of this community, and just want to second, it's been incredible to watch what folks are doing. Even vendors having other vendors on their events, just because there's a focus on let's get the information out, let's share what's happening. And I think it also shows us kind of unifying as a profession, this space coming together and saying, hey, we can make a big impact. This is our time to shine. Let's do it. And I almost get a little bit teary-eyed, but I'm so proud of what I've seen people do. And it's just remarkable.
Yeah, agreed. And you're among them. So thank you again. And thank you, Priyanka. And we'll see you soon. Yeah, hopefully in person before too long.
Hopefully. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for having us.